Good morning and welcome to the Saturday Conversation. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Gerry Hamilton. We're going to talk a little Longhorn football and the NCAA transfer portal today. Texas currently with 10 verbal commitments, not just verbal, actually, signed commitments from players in the transfer portal. Longhorns have 3 specialists on board, punter, kicker, and long snapper to go along with 7 positional players. We'll talk a little bit about the most recent 2 guys that came in on yesterday, Gerry, on Friday. We're also going to talk about a couple of guys that we believe are coming in later today for Texas, among what could be others, not just 2, but we're waiting to see and try to figure out all of those players that may be on campus. But, Gerry, let's start with the 2 young men that committed on Friday, Dylan Sikorsky, offensive lineman out of Oregon State, and Justin Cryer, linebacker out of Florida State.
Yeah, so Sikorsky started 6 games at Oregon State, obviously left guard. So we're not saying that's where he's penciled in to compete for a starting job, but left guard is what he played for Oregon State. Graded out really well as a pass protector, I think 444 snaps, and had 1 sack given up according to Pro Football Focus, PFF. I think he's ahead as a pass blocker versus a run blocker. But after Texas struggles in pass pro last year, I think that's what made him very attractive, is he is a quality guard in pass protection. And he's still a young guy. What I like about him, Bobby, is I know everybody's chasing the 1-year portal guys that are going to be off to the NFL. I think there needs to be a mix of some 2-year guys in that as well. And so I like that Dylan Sikorsky is a multi-year guy. He'll come into Texas as a red shirt sophomore. So he's got multiple years left. I still think there needs to be some developmental players. Justin Cryer, he's originally from Brookshire Royal, right outside of Katy, which I guess is part of Katy now as much as Houston's grown. He is the younger brother of L.J. Cryer, who was a really good guard at Baylor and U of H on their national runner-up team, now playing professionally. He's come up in an athletic family. He's been at FSU for 3 years. He is a thumper, and we'll probably get into what this means, but he's a 6'1", 237-pound A-B gap linebacker, middle backer. I think he's had about 85 tackles at FSU over 3 years, but that is the role he will play for Texas. And a bigger guy, too, carrying around 240 pounds, and he carries power on contact is what he does. Not going to be asked to do a lot in coverage or outside the tackles, but from A B gap standpoint, he brings some thunder on contact. And we've heard that Will Muschamp wanted a thumper or 2 in his scheme in the SEC to defend the run, and that's what Justin Cryer is.
I was going to say that's not really what Ty Anthony Smith does.
No.
To your point. All right, we'll get into those 2. So that brings Texas to 10 commitments. Been a big week overall for Texas. Like I mentioned, 7 different guys. Raleek Brown, running back from Arizona State. Michael Masunis, a tight end from Michigan State. Sikorsky is the first offensive lineman. Then we had a couple of defensive linemen, Ian Traffard from Arkansas, as well as Zion Williams from LSU, both signed with the Longhorns. Then Cryer at linebacker, and then Bo Masco, young man out of Rutgers that has committed and signed with the University of Texas. Gerry, they are not the only ones that have been on campus. Texas has had some other guys that have visited, particularly this Thursday, Friday time frame, before we talk about what's going to happen on Saturday and Sunday later today. Mikey Bennett, an offensive lineman from Yale, all Ivy League performer, is also looking at, I believe it's Oregon at this time. Cade Uluwave, a linebacker out of Cal. He was on campus for 2 consecutive days. Wendell Gregory, a defensive end out of Oklahoma State, who had 4 sacks a year ago. Any of those guys stick out to you right now as guys you think that are close to a decision or you feel confident with at Texas? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
We've heard some pretty positive things about Mikey Bennett, the offensive lineman, who is a 2-time first-team All-Ivy League player for Yale. He's at a Holy Innocents private school in the Alpharetta area of Georgia, north of Atlanta. So we've heard some positives there. Of course, we wait, and you never know. In the portal, we're more in wait and see mode, but we think he's had a really good visit to Texas and can see a fit at Texas, both academically, which shouldn't surprise people, and athletically. So that's one we're hearing a lot on. Kedu Luave, we're kind of monitoring where else does he show up on visits. I think that's the big thing because, as we said, despite him going in with a no contact tag, all that means is I'm not open to everybody. And I already have a pretty good idea of the schools I want to visit. It doesn't mean you're only going to visit one. So we'll see. Michigan's been mentioned with Kedu Luave. We're waiting to see if BYU is mentioned because he's from Harriman, Utah. Obviously, to visit the Michigan, Utah recruited him out of high school. Kyle Whittingham, the head coach at Michigan now. So there's a built-in prior relationship there. That's why we're also going to wait to see if BYU pops up as a possibility for Uluave. But he is a first-team All-ACC linebacker. When Texas began this hunt for linebackers in the portal, he was the number 2 guy on the board.
Yep. Jerry, you mentioned Gregory as well. I did. He's the defensive end out of Oklahoma State. He's also looking at Wisconsin right now. We'll see whether or not Texas can figure out how that plays into everything else they're doing. Certainly somebody that they're interested in right now as well, though. All right, before we go to the next part, which is the guys coming in today, we know of at least 2 of them that are expected. We want to say thank you to our sponsor of the Saturday Morning Conversation. That is real estate expert Laura Baker. If you're moving to, from, or within the Austin area and need an expert that knows Austin and the surrounding area like the back of her hand, look no further than Laura Baker, 512-784-0505. She'll help you go to open houses. She'll do all that stuff. Knows all the different ins and outs of the city of Austin. Or reach out to her, Laura at AndyAllenTeam.com, 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Laura's also a major UT fan, been hanging out with us at the tailgates for a couple of years now. So look forward to hopefully you can reach out to her if you have any needs in the housing department. All right, Jerry, 2 big-time guys expected on campus later today. Rasheem Biles, All-ACC linebacker from Pitt, has already visited both Colorado and Michigan. Biles, just one of those guys that gets around the football. And then also, this one's going to be a surprise to many people. Hollywood Smothers, a North Carolina State running back, is expected to be on campus at Texas. Now, a lot of people thought Smothers was already committed and signed to Alabama. Well, he did indeed commit to Alabama. But as of late Friday, he had not signed with Alabama, and Texas had been working to get him on campus. And it looks like now that is going to come to pass. Jerry, let's start with Biles, but let's talk about Smothers as well.
Yeah, Biles is a tremendous defensive player as a linebacker, one of the best pure football players on defense in college football this past season, in my estimation. He's the first player in 18 years to have 15 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, and score a touchdown in the same game. Like Kedu Luave, first-team All-ACC linebacker. He's just a 6'1", 220. He might be a little undersized to some people, but he makes up for it with his instincts, his closing ability on the ball, his playmaking, his versatility, can even rush off the edge from time to time as an undersized linebacker, but just one of the best overall defensive players in college football, in my opinion, that's going to be returning next year. He's that level playmaker. And look, with Kedu Luave still taking visits, the Rasheem Biles recruitment becomes even bigger for Texas because Christian Aliegra, obviously the top linebacker target when all this began in the portal, has committed to Ohio State. And even though Cryer's in the fold, with Bo Barnes now being gone, I think there's a need for 3 linebackers, Bobby. I think there's a need for 3 linebackers. Texas has 1. They need to go secure 2 more before the end of this portal.
So you think there is room for both Uluave and Rasheem Biles if they make themselves available?
I don't know how likely it is, but there's room.
I got it. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's talk about next Hollywood Smothers. Young man that played his last 3 seasons, I believe, at NC State. Had a big year this year, 160 carries for them, 939 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaged almost 6 yards a carry, Jerry. He is a fast, quick guy that's 5'11", 195, so he's a little bit bigger than Raleek Brown. Texas had been working on him behind the scenes to get him in, committed to Alabama early in the transfer portal process, but then did not sign with them. So we'll see what that means for the Longhorns here and Hollywood Smothers, whether or not he actually does make it in. He's scheduled to make it in today. We'll see if he does. But what do you make of this kind of late surge by the Longhorns after losing out on some other guys early in the process?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when he committed to Alabama, we all just assumed, like you said, he signed and he's off the board. But now with this development, look, I think he's a really good football player. And 939 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns this year, 6 yards a pop. He had 571 at 6.5 yards a carry in 2024. Bobby, he's also caught 56 passes for 452 yards in the last 2 seasons. So he is more than a runner. He can catch the football as well. So you can see why Steve Sarkisian has identified him in the Texas staff as a guy that they would love to make a run at and upset Alabama, because I think he's an inside zone runner, but I also think he can be really effective out of the backfield. And I think that is Raleek Brown's going to be effective out of the backfield as well. So if you can have a number of backs who can be used in the passing game, that makes your offense more versatile. I mean, he had some big games this year. I mean, he had 140 yards and 2 touchdowns against Virginia. He had 164 yards against Wake. He had 123 yards rushing, 41 receiving against Duke. So he put it on the board. He performed well, even in the loss to Notre Dame. I mean, he still had 46 rushing and 21 receiving against one of the better defenses that NC State played, as well as 8 carries for 86 yards and 3 catches for 25 yards against Pitt. The only team that shut him down this year was Miami. And what we've seen in the playoffs, we're not surprised. They shut a lot of people down with that defensive front.
I want to say this. One of the things that we're noticing as a trend with guys that Steve Sarkisian is looking at in the portal are guys that can hit the home run.
Yeah.
He had 4 carries over 50 yards this year.
Yep.
Long of 65 against Pitt that you mentioned, but he also had 50-plus yard runs against Duke and Virginia. So which were 2 of the better defenses they actually played. So I think that it's going to be interesting to see if they can indeed get him on campus and then what happens with him along the way. Gerry, before we close out this Saturday morning conversation, I've got to ask you, the number of players that have exited the Texas program, I believe now is up to 22, if you include Kobe Black, who left Texas on Friday, announced his departure. Your thoughts overall on this thinning of the roster at the University of Texas?
Yeah, look, I think it's happening a lot in college football right now at the major universities. And the one thing I'll say about that is, Bobby, you kind of mentioned a couple of weeks ago around the Citrus Bowl that, look, we could start seeing some smaller NIL scholarship rosters. And that certainly looks like where Texas is headed right now. And that doesn't mean they're not going to sign 17, 18 guys out of the portal, but that includes 3 specialists now. But I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And I think it's going to be a gradual thing. I don't think it's going to be necessarily we're going from 85 to 65 in 1 year. But I think it's gradually going to work that direction. And I also want to say this for the kids that have left Texas. There's a lot of these guys that are going to end up at pretty good universities. It's just more of how rosters are changing, how college football is changing, more than the talent of some of these guys. I mean, Nate Kibbles goes to Baylor, Caleb Chester goes to Arizona State, obviously Parker Livingston, OU, Trey Wisner, Florida State, Leon Galafau, Colorado, Santana Wilson, Louisville. I mean, these guys are landing. We're going to have multiple guys land at Kentucky, in my estimation, maybe 3 or 4. Jamie French visiting Florida and Florida State, along with South Florida. I mean, these kids are getting to some pretty good spots. Jarrett Gibson, Purdue, they're getting to some pretty good spots. So these weren't like misses in recruiting, which I think a lot of people are thinking about. These guys are going to go play Power 4 football, and some of these guys are probably going to end up in NFL training camps one day. But it's just the changes in college football right now. It's money allotment. Where are you allotting that money? How many guys are you allotting that money to? And Bobby, you're the first person in the Texas market to hit on it. but I think we're going to see this push towards 65 over the next couple of years.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that you just can't. I mean, money's not endless. And how many players do you really need, especially if those guys that are at the bottom of your roster cost a lot of money, that may just be freshmen that don't play much. I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, Bo Barnes, terrific young player, in my opinion. Played as a freshman at Texas, made 4 tackles the whole year, right? So at what level value does a true freshman? Now, they're going to be rare freshmen, for example, that will play a lot. I mean, we saw some of that with, I don't know, Lance Jackson, Nick Townsend, Grayson Littleton. But so many freshmen aren't, yet they want to be recruited like they are and compensated like they're going to play right away. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road with some situations. And so if you didn't play a lot as a freshman and you're expecting a big payday as a sophomore, I don't think that's the way it's going to work in college football anywhere anymore. Because I will also add this: they may find good landing spots for themselves. That's not necessarily meaning they're going to equal their NIL payout of what it would have been at Texas. And that's there may be a caveat or two to that. In Parker Livingston's case, I think he got somewhat more. I think for Trey Wisner, I don't even know if he got what Texas offered. And so I think that you add all of that together, Jerry, and we're seeing a thinning of the roster. We're seeing a reallocation of resources. I really do think it's economics 101, like I mentioned on Friday. All right, that's going to do it for today's Saturday conversation. Thank you very much to Gerry Hamilton. Thank you also to our friend Laura Baker, your Austin real estate expert. If you have any needs, make sure you reach out to her, 512-784-0505, or Laura at andyallenteam.com. She'll greet you with a smile and also talk Texas football with you. All right, Jerry, thanks very much. We'll be back later today, no question, to update you on the Hollywood Smothers as well as Rasheem Biles. Make sure both those guys came in as expected. And perhaps there might be another visitor or two. So for Gerry Hamilton, I'm Bobby Burton. You guys have a good morning and afternoon. Hook 'em horns.